Yeah, well, where's
It's
normally
27.
food with
Chad
that?
just pisses me off.
No, but they're with one.
Okay, right here.
It's solid 11 people, so.
Is it one per pod?
No, they kind of,
So there's 6.
usually there's somebody who gets stuck.
Oh, yeah, last meeting I was.
This one's town meeting. Where are we?
Annual town. This is the one where you're doing like state of the.
Town.
Yeah.
So you just have to relax this. So, so I'm gonna.
With all our townspeople.
Yeah. We're almost.
I'm impressed you're here.
I brave the cold. Yep.
Don't,
You're gonna
it's gonna
support
be bad on Saturday morning, does this move to?
Friendly.
And the charter.
Friendly. And the charter.
That's right.
Nice.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Representing the charter.
That's right.
6 o'clock, so. Do you start here or does Jean start? No, everything's going. I think, Jean, we want to start the meeting so you can start recording. Okay, recording started and, okay, take it. Okay, Nancy.
So I'm Nancy Martucci, the town clerk. It's now 6 p.m., so I'd like to call the meeting to order. And our first agenda is we're going to do pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Bruce, you were like. You had all you on there.
So tonight we're here for the annual town meeting, which includes review the state of the town report, review the 5-year capital plan, and to receive the annual reports for the permanent boards, commissions, agencies, committees, and the town's auditor report. So according to our charter, 2.1.1, since we do not have a quorum of 150, which is a new amount based on the most recent charter change, the annual report and order report are approved. First Selectman Woman Peggy Lyons is going to do a presentation. And then if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. And I'll turn it over to
Okay, great. All right. I want to welcome everybody. Give me 1 second because doing the hybrid is a little complicated sometimes. And so I just want to make sure that this is all working. And just for those who have not been to the annual town meeting, what we do typically, there's usually not any voting or anything that happens with this. This is just to receive some reports that the town had completed, and then for me to give kind of an overview of the state of the town. So I have a PowerPoint presentation I'm going to share with the public, and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentation. I also just want to comment that other people here at the front of the room are other members of the Board of Selectmen, and that we do have okay. How did that happen? All right, Jean, can you hear us okay in this room?
Looks like you're still muted.
I'm muted, but I'm
You can
supposed to
see
be
that.
using that microphone, so the problem if I do this, it'll have a backlash, so can somebody go talk to her for a second?
Is she in the office?
Yeah, she's in her desk.
I'll go down.
I just want to make sure that people at home heard the whole kickoff of this, so luckily it was recorded.
Yes, now she can.
Okay, she can, okay. All right, so we're good. All right, so, so I just to repeat for those who are joining us, the annual town meeting, there's no voting. This is just an opportunity to present an overview of the state of the town. So with that, I'm going to start giving a presentation. Welcome, everybody. We already did the Pledge of Allegiance. Today we'll go through, and this is similar structure. This is my fourth State of the Town presentation. So I've tried to keep consistent in terms of structure. We'll talk about our community strengths and challenges, the progress we made in 2022, budget trends, talk about the capital plan, the debt profile, and then talk about a lot of the projects that are going on and upcoming initiatives, because we've got a lot going on in town right now. I think community strengths, these are all things I'm sure you'll recognize, that, we're a very desirable place to live. We have a very strong community, vibrant downtown, exceptional community volunteerism. I just want to highlight, we have over 60, over 160 volunteer committees in town. So we have a lot of residents who participate in our town government and sitting on different boards and committees that the town has. We have low density living, and I think COVID taught us to appreciate the amenities and the natural resources that our town have. We also have access to health, high quality healthcare, and we have a very educated workforce. And we have a very strong economic profile with a high medium income. And I'm just getting asked to pause. Are you not able to hear?
Something's going on with the audio.
Okay. I am unmuted. Hold on for 1 second for those that are listening.
You're unmuted?
I'm not supposed to be, because it would pick it up here is the problem.
That's supposed to be muted.
Yeah, this is muted.
That's unmuted.
Is there something here I'm supposed to do?
Because we're hearing double. Yeah.
So nothing's getting, I don't know why this worked fine before. So she can't hear me speaking at all.
No, we can hear you speaking, but it's coming in double.
Oh, let me try muting that. Okay, is it coming in double now? Is that better? Sorry about that. It's the first time we've done a presentation setup in this room.
You might see it.
It's better. She said it's better.
Sound is gone, it's back, okay. Yeah,
Yeah, I just got a text saying sounds good.
okay.
Good. Well, there
Sorry,
you go.
folks, this is the first time we've done this in this room, so this is kind of a new setup for us, which is stuck to what we know, right? This is like higher tech than what we have in the
This is fancy.
Board of Selectmen room, so it has a much nicer screen, so it's anyway, just going through all the things that we know about our town. And these are great strengths that we have, and we're fortunate to live here. And one thing I also want to highlight is our strong town finances. We have had stable tax collection over the years. We have a sizable reserve base, and we'll talk more about that. We have a premium AAA bond rating, which we just recently got reconfirmed by Moody's. And we've been very successful at winning other funding sources, so we don't have to tax the public to pay for some of these projects. We can use state and federal funds. In terms of challenges, obviously being a coastal community, we're really having to rethink, how we develop along our shoreline, and also a lot of our infrastructure, and address some issues. And we'll be talking a lot about that tonight at the Board of Selectmen meeting at 45, about things that we're going to have to do to protect our community, make it more resilient. When I say limited public infrastructure, it's more, we don't have sewer systems, we don't have public water throughout the town, so it does limit the type of development that we can see in Madison. Inflation is obviously hitting Madison just like it is the country and the entire world. And the labor market shortage is still having an impact here, although we are starting to see that loosen up quite a bit. We have an aging population with changing community needs. And then obviously the long-term impact of COVID is creating both physical and mental health issues that we need to address with our services. The other thing we're tackling is that, historically, we didn't necessarily keep up on all our investment needs with a lot of our town facilities. And so those things are coming to roost, which is why we had to pass early this year the Madison School Renewal Plan. And so we have to deal with a lot of these buildings and make decisions and whether or not we're going to invest in them further. And then affordability is a problem. That's a problem for the state of Connecticut, and it's a problem for Madison, keeping our town affordable so people can stay in our community as they age. And then there's a lot of concern about development. that's going on about too much development. And we're going to have a lot of communication and conversations about that over the coming year about what our town wants to see in terms of development. And a lot of that is driven by a need for greater housing and more housing diversity. So these are some of the challenges we're facing. I think the good thing is we made a lot of progress this last year. This one particularly, I think, was a very big year for the town. We took 3 big decisions to referendum, including the Academy Community Center, which for over 20 years had sat vacant, and the town was kind of struggling of what to do with that asset, and the voters approved turning it into a community center. The other thing was this Madison School Renewal Plan. We had a lot of question marks about our schools, what to invest in them, what buildings we need. And this is a comprehensive plan that touches all the different grades in Madison to upgrade the quality of our facilities, including building a new school. We also were awarded over $9 million in state and federal grants this year, which will help offset other capital project needs the taxpayers might have to fund. So this is great because rather than having to sacrifice some projects in order to continue with the school plans and academy, we're able to redeploy that money and keep forward on some of our well-needed capital projects. And then we made a decision, this was part of one of the bonding questions, or not referendum questions, was to sell a school that the town was no longer operating. It had been leased, private school had been leasing it from the town. And the sale of that school, which had huge support from the community, I think it was 72% approved or 74% approved of selling the building to OLM Prep. And that created $2.3 million for us in proceeds to use for other projects. We also had a lot of citizen-driven committees that continue to move forward. 2 building committees, one for the new school, one for the Academy Center. And then also we created a committee to handle the $5.3 million the town received from the American Rescue Plan. And that committee worked hard this year and distributed a lot of those funds, and we'll talk about that later. Affordable Housing Committee, we had an ad hoc committee, a short-term committee that created that affordable housing plan. And now we're seating a new committee that's going to tackle executing on that plan and moving things forward with that. And then we just established a new facilities committee because part of the referendum and the Madison School Renewal Plan involves closing down some other buildings in town. And we need to, rather than having them sit there for 20 years where we can't make decisions, we're going to try to come up with a comprehensive master plan for all our facilities so that we can make decisions quickly. And then on the policy front, we passed a new charter this year, which was, I think, a really big deal. And our previous charter dated to 2006. We had a failed referendum on the charter in 2019, and excited to have strong approval for the new charter on the November ballot this last 2022. And then there's some other policy things the board is working on right now. One is on short-term rentals, one is on floodplain management, and we'll be meeting on floodplain management after this meeting. And then planning. I mean, one of the things I've been very focused on since coming into office is long-term planning for the town. And we kind of got a lot of things moving in that direction, more targeted plans for different things. And now we're trying to do that master plan for the whole town, the strategic plan. So the strategic plan process has started. We actually issued an RFP for a consultant. We're going to try to leverage a lot of the work that was done before in 2019 and then bring to the public, and there'll be a lot of opportunity for public input on a town's strategic plan. So that's a lot of progress we've made on the policy front. On an operational front, shared services, we have an economic development director in town now who is part-time Madison, part-time Guilford. So we're trying to leverage her skill set to help both towns. We just launched a food waste diversion pilot program with Guilford. That's part of a grant program that we received from the state. And that will allow residents to turn their food scraps into energy. So there's a lot of information. Go to the town website if you're interested in signing up for that pilot program. And we're actually exploring some other shared services with other towns right now also to try to get some economies of scale and areas that we don't feel we have to have like a huge presence in. So. And then we've done a number of things since I came into office in terms of improving operations and services in town. We did another reorganization this year where we combined some departments and streamlined reporting relationships. So we're trying to kind of break down the silos between different departments so they can operate more efficiently. We're adding a specialist in procurement so we can save money on our bidding process and our purchasing and purchasing goods and services for the town. And we've added in-house grant writing capabilities. As you can see that grants has been a huge benefit to this town. So I think it's an important place to invest. It's paid back in spades. The $9 million, I think, shows that it's important to have that capability in-house. We've also implemented an employee performance review process to kind of create more accountability with staff and also just create also more career development opportunities for staff by putting that process in place. And then obviously remote access to town services, which we're experiencing tonight with the hybrid, which sometimes goes great, sometimes not, but hopefully everybody knows now that there's a lot you can get online without having to come to town hall. And I know the big one was always the beach passes. I think a huge percentage of our beach passes now are sold online. So we're trying to offer those convenient services for people through technology. And then finally, better communication. We're always trying to improve. It's never perfect, but we've done a lot to improve that, including most recently, a town app, which I'd like to highlight that you can actually download the Town of Madison app. And so go to the website, and this is a much more easier way to just see what's going on in town. You can sign up for alerts. It has the calendar there. So it'll just make, getting access to things that are going on with town government easier for you. So I just wanted to highlight that. So get the app. Budget trends. So obviously, a budget gets voted on in May, and I think really we're going through the budgeting process for this next fiscal year. So the Board of Selectmen will be holding a number of workshops, and eventually this will make its way to the public where you'll be voting on this in May. But just want to highlight a couple things. I mean, our revenue growth has actually been at higher rates than previous years. The mill rate is actually growing at a lower rate than the budget and revenue. And so we've really done a lot of different things to try to make sure that the tax impact isn't as much of the taxpayer. So it's not a direct translation. I want to highlight again, because a lot of people think budget growth equals tax growth, and it doesn't. There's a lot of things that go into that formula. And what we've tried to do is, keep the great growth of the mill rate down as much as possible. We were fortunate that in the previous year, we were able to offer no growth of the mill rate. And last year we had just under 2% growth of the mill rate. And then I also want to highlight that even though the town budget has been growing, the operating budget, which is really kind of the nuts and bolts of the operation, has been growing at a much slower rate. When I came into office, that budget was growing at 7%, and I've cut that more than in half at a 3% growth rate. So trying to control the operating costs, control the fixed cost. The total town budget includes capital, and I'll talk about later that is growing because we're making strategic investments now, so we don't have to put so much into capital later. So we can kind of drop the amount of money that we put into capital in the future to make up for the amount of debt as it comes on board, and then keep things just growing at a very low rate. So this is part of the Madison investment plan that I'll talk about in a little bit. In terms of just our capital plan, last week the town has a committee that oversees the town's capital improvement plan. And this just demonstrates kind of where we're investing. There's a lot of detail on the website on this that shows you the projects, departments, timeline. I just want to highlight, this doesn't mean we're spending this every year in the budget. We budget actually into a savings account that saves for these projects. And so we put in roughly $3.5 to $4.5 million every year into savings accounts that then allows us to build up balances to do these projects when the time comes. So we have a long-term look, it's a long-term savings plan, and it allows us to have a lot of projects going on because we start streamlining and saving every year for the projects going forward. We also go after grants. So we pay for probably 70% of this out of the CIP budgeting mechanism to the town budget. The other 20 to 30% is through grants and donations and other sources of funding for these projects. So a lot more detail on this on the website. In terms of debt, obviously the town approved in February 2022 that we would need to go out to bonding to do these the two major projects, the Madison School Renewal Plan and the Academy Community Center project. We started with our first note issuance in December that was well received. We issued about $8 million in notes, taking our outstanding debt level to about $24 million. But at the same point, we're also seeing a decline of the high school debt. So we're going to be weaning off of the debt that we had incurred from building the new high school, which is now not the new high school. So as that debt goes down, we'll be ramping up for these other projects. The good thing is that we continue to keep our AAA credit rating after the referendums. Doing an issuance really kind of during tough economic times this last December, and our bonds were snapped right up. They continue to keep the AAA rating. So we feel really good about that. And we've got a plan over the next couple of years where we're going to be issuing more debt. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to manage that so that that doesn't hit the mill rate directly. It's going to be a smoothing out process so that we can continue to manage the growth in taxes. Challenges with capital, with our CIP program, which is our capital improvement plan, is that, we want to avoid those spikes. How do we keep investing in other projects besides the schools without having spikes in the mill rate? Because I think that's what had happened in the past. When a big nut came along, we started cutting capital, or we had a budget crisis, we would cut capital funding. And that's why things kind of built up. We ended up having this big backlog of projects. So now we're trying to avoid that by planning into the future. And so we're trying to, and we've come up with a funding plan for that. We also still have a lot of maintenance. The Madison school renewal plan addressed some big picture issues, but there's still a lot of maintenance that's needed on the schools. And I know prior to the referendum, there's a lot of discussion about that, this $120 million maintenance plan. So we're trying to chip away at those other things that were not as important as what was in the Madison renewal plan, building a new school, upgrading the HVAC, those big projects. But we still need to chip away at those smaller projects, and they're important to make sure that we have a safe environment for students. So we're trying to balance that and the fact that we have a lot of old buildings in town. And they all have needs. They all have roofs that have to be replaced. Their ventilation systems need to be improved, structural issues. So we have a 10-year plan that addresses a lot of that. And then we're kind of shifting around priorities to make sure that we can afford to do that. And then the other factor that's hitting us is obviously cost escalations, because of the inflationary environment and a lot of the activity going on in town or in the country with construction activity. Prices have increased quite a lot. So you can, you put a project in 3 years ago, the cost to do that project, and we always plan for escalation. We project out and we assume prices are going to go up. But the reality is we're going through an unusual period now where the prices are spiking even higher. So trying to manage that and prioritize and get things done still within budget requires some trade-offs. And then I think the other thing that will be helping the capital issues is this new facilities committee, because we're going to have to deal with some of these what's going to be vacant buildings. Jeffrey's going to be vacant. Ryerson has already been slated for demolition, so we have land there to use. Youth and Family Services building, they're all going to be moving into the academy school when it's done, so that building will be vacant. We have the Town Campus Learning Center, because that's the pre-K program, that's going to move into the new school. And then we still have some property around the Polson School that we have to make some decisions on. So those are, big, I think, strategic decisions that this committee will help us do. And then we'll have kind of a plan and a vision for the future with the rest of our facilities. I talked earlier about how do we get through this without having, high taxes, basically, or huge spikes in the taxes. And I want to give a lot of credit to our finance director, who spent a lot of time thinking about these things, but we've come up what we kind of call the Madison investment plan. And so really what this is trying to strategically use a couple of different sources of funding to get ahead of the debt as it starts to increase, the interest cost that's coming. And so that's using, some of that is putting a lot more into CIP. I talked about, those higher town budget numbers that were growing higher. It's not that we're spending like crazy. We were taking money and putting it in a savings account, extra money. We normally put, like I said, $3.5 million a year into the savings account. Last year, we put, I think, an additional $750,000. The plan is to do another $600,000 or $750,000 and do a one-off, maybe $3 million contribution to that account. Build those balances up so that as we move forward, we don't have to put as much into their savings account in the future. And that's what this really is. The other piece of that is using grants and which we've been successful at doing, and I'll highlight some of those grants later. And then thirdly is we're fortunate, we have a very large surplus undesignated fund balance. So this isn't the rainy day fund. The rainy day fund is actually just a portion of that $20 million. We're required to have an amount around $9 million right now in our regulation as a rainy day fund. And then I think the Board of Finance will have some conversations about what that buffer is. You know, do they really want to make sure that they have like $12 million in there? Well, that still leaves $8 million that this is money that we have taxed Madison residents for. So we want to take that and use it strategically to continue to move forward on projects, but also help future taxes. And so that's one of the levers we're going to pull as we go forward in the budgeting process to make sure that we can keep taxes down over the next couple of years. And then in terms of ARPA, this is the American Rescue Plan funds, and this came out in 2021 actually, but we got the money and we started putting together, the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance approved a number of projects, and then last year we created a public committee. And we spent a majority of these projects. It's been a balance between capital projects that the town wanted to do, but then the committee, the public committee actually went out and got offered the opportunity for community groups to apply for project funding. And so they issued on here, I think it was probably, over $1 million to different community projects. And there's still a few outstanding applications. They kind of closed down the end of December, the committee. They said, we've done as much as we can do. We did our public outreach, and they've turned over the rest of the ARPA funds back to the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. So we'll be kind of talking about that. But a lot of great things have come out of ARPA, and I encourage you to go on the website and look at all the different projects that have been funded. We're lucky to have gotten this money, but I think we also wanted to make sure that we used it for things that were going to benefit the taxpayers in the long run. It's all about, some of it, and when I say offsetting taxes, it's not just to cut taxes, it's actually taking away expenditures from the future so that we don't have to pay for them later. And so that was kind of the thinking behind that. And then the state and federal grants. I mean, I will say the town has been really proactive at going after as many grants that we could. We have had a huge backlog of projects, and the only way we were going to be able to get any of these moving is if we found other sources of money. We couldn't possibly afford to do all this right now, especially considering we have that school renewal plan moving forward. And so the biggest one was the $4 million grant from the state we received last year for Academy. That's roughly 25% of the cost of the entire project. So that was huge for the town. That's going to save us like, I want to say a couple $100,000 in interest expense that we're not going to have to pay in future budgets because that'll be paid for by the grant. And then more recently, we were really fortunate to receive 2 federal grants on projects that really have just been kind of out there. Senator Blumenthal came to Madison on Monday, and just to kind of kick off the awarding of a federal grant for our emergency shelter. I know there's been a lot of conversation about we need a better shelter. Where's it going to be? Should we put it in the new school? Should we put it? Well, we actually had a committee look at this 18 months ago, and the committee recommended Polson Middle School. And there's a lot of factors that go into a shelter requirements by FEMA. And they identified Polson Middle School. We don't have a generator there, so we need money. This is going to be a $2 million plus project, but the federal government's basically covering half the cost of it, which is fantastic. So we want to get that moving quickly. And the other big, I will say, federal project, and we'll have some more information on this coming out, is on downtown, the Madison Hose building. For many years, they've needed to expand their facility in order to accommodate their larger equipment. And then the town also didn't have a dedicated emergency operations center. So all these emergencies we have, this was our EOC in here, which is the Board of Ed conference room, and we had a closet to put stuff. And so there's a lot that goes into an emergency operations center. So now we're going to be able to put that in a training room in the downtown firehouse. That'll be, and a lot of towns have their EOCs in firehouses. And so that will enable us to have a dedicated EOC downtown and also get Madison Hose well-needed space in their facility. So those are 2 really exciting ones. And then we have a lot of other ones. and we're going for more. We're applying for more. So I'm hoping to continue to chip away at these projects with federal and state grants. And then I think just going through the status of projects, I know a lot of people know that obviously we approved the school renewal plan. We have 2 building committees now moving this through. And then the Brown facility upgrades that were part of that are actually going to be starting this summer. And the Academy Community Center, we received the grant, as well as we have a building committee, and they just selected an architect. And then we have an advisory committee that's focused on programming in the building. So they've been doing a lot of work, and some of you participated in that community survey. So that was part of the Academy Advisory Committee. The sale of Island Avenue closed in June of this year. And then Madison Center project, which is kind of the downtown center project, people might are familiar with that. But we've finally got all the easements done. And we actually did a lot of electrical work was finalized now, downtown infrastructure work. The next piece is going to each property and making improvements to those properties to accept overhead or underground utility lines, because right now they're used to getting their electric from above from the poles. Now it's going to come from underground. So that work is going to be starting in February. And then finally the poles can come down. So we're still hoping to get there this spring. And it's just been a long, laborious process. I mean, we might have some issues with supply chain, unfortunately, because this involves a lot like transformers and certain boxes and things that we're trying to get a hold of. But then on top of that, we received $1.2 million of new state grants to do phase 3, which is the stuff that didn't get done before. The Madison Center project had to be re-engineered because of the budget. And so there was no work conducted, anything from the firehouse to Route 79. That was all kind of dropped off the project. So now we're going to look to extend all the streetscape improvements, the bricks, the curbing, the lighting. That's all going to be part of phase 3. And we have these 2 new state grants that we received in the fall to help us move that forward. So it'd be great to finally get that project done. I talked about the emergency shelter already and the operations center. The Garvin Point seawall restoration project, that will start under construction this fall. That was something the town also received a state grant of $740,000. That's a multi-million-dollar project that we thought we weren't going to be able to afford to do, and it's a critical piece of our gem, the surf club. So we're excited to see that move forward. And then it's not a big project, but I did have to put it on here, is the dog park. So I know a lot of people, this has been a 4 or 5 year saga. We finally got approved from planning and zoning. There was some upgrades that were added through the approval process. So we were able to use ARPA funds, which I talked about earlier, to fund those upgrades. And so I think the plan is construction in April, if we can get everything we need, and then it'll be open in May. So that's kind of like where we are on all these projects. I will just kind of finish off with upcoming initiatives. I mentioned the strategic plan, so keep an eye out for opportunities to participate and give your feedback to the strategic plan. We're going to continue to focus on this Madison investment plan to soften the impact of the bonding. I know people are always worried, all this debt, when is it going to come and when are we going to have to pay for it? We're going to see all these spikes in the mill rate. We're trying to avoid that. We're doing everything we can to keep this as minimal as impact as possible on taxes. And then continue to position us to receive state and federal grants, focus on coastal resiliency still. This is one that's a priority that we've had the last couple of years, and we're continuing to do things to improve. And then the operational improvements, always looking to improve and looking for new ideas. And then just tackle some of these citizen-driven policy initiatives that residents have come to with, like the short-term rental issue and the floodplain ordinance. So that is kind of the state of the town. I've been talking for way too long. And with that, I guess I can open it up to questions. And what I will do is stop sharing this. And then I will open it up to any questions. Why don't I start within the room, and then I can go to people online. Any questions from the members of the public? No?
Sure. Yeah,
So Jean, if you want, if you could help anybody who has their hand raised and has a question,
There are no hands raised at this juncture.
no hands raised, I'll going once. Let me go to question Q&A here, yeah, okay. This was all about sound, I think. Oops.
Click the participants to see who's on.
Now we have 13 attendees. And, hear you now, okay, no, sorry. Okay, nope, no questions online. No hands raised.
No hands raised.
All right, well, thank you very much. This presentation will be available online as well as the annual report that we just accepted. And you can always email me at lionsp@madisonct.org if you have any follow-up questions. So thank you with that, and I guess we'll adjourn the town meeting. Thank you. Okay.
Make sure you're on here.